I've mentioned chemtrails often and the history of the chemtrails. I've gone on to Teller before, the guy who invented the H-bomb, and how he not only was into chemtrails, he wanted to associate chemtrails not just with weather modification, but also with using electromagnetic frequency waves. We now call it HARP technology, which it can interact with these metallic particles in the air that they spray and alter the weather. And he wanted it for warfare purposes. And I've got a few articles here about some of the things to do with that, because it's so prevalent. Just the last few days, I've watched the skies, which were temporarily blue, temporarily for years, because before that you get the white mush. And I've read the fact that the guys in Geo-Engineering say, yeah, if they do it, they'll get white mush, and that's what you end up, these whitish skies. But there's a few weeks of blue for there, and bang, I knew something was going to happen. They've altered the stuff. They're putting on heavier than ever before, and they're building up a storm, and it broke today. In came that really black clouds as it was spraying away, and it was like a monsoon. You don't get normal rain now, you get monsoons. A lot of rain falls in a few hours, way more than it used to. The weather is completely manipulated, not just in Canada or the States, but across the world. And as they do this, again, perception management comes into play, because they must normalize what you're seeing so that you'll think, oh, well, you know, and they come out with the contrail stuff. Oh, that's condensation and all the rest of it. And I love this one that came out in the Telegraph newspaper, the photographs of the week type thing. And you see this mess over London, and they're normalizing chemtrails into contrails now. You see, we're back to contrails. Just to get you used to that. So that when someone says chemtrails, immediately, oh no, they're contrails, you see. And I'll put this link up tonight so you can see the mush over London yourself, which is pretty almost the mush over me. I only have a tiny wee airport to the north of me, and it only gets about 4 or maybe even 3 or even 2 flights per day, mainly from Texas, because they come up to do with the mining in Sudbury, the big boys. Now, I'll put that one up, and also I'll put up one to do with, it's called Stolen Skies. And it's quite interesting. It's written by William Thomas. Now, William Thomas is a kind of greeny type guy, and I think he works for the United Nations Department at one point in the field type thing. But he does good follow-ups to what's happening in the sky. And he talks about how the jet trails in the sky used to disappear, but now they linger. In fact, they stay, and they widen, in fact, to merge with other trails that they're laying. And he goes through a story to do what happened, I think in British Columbia, Canada, to a guy who saw this stuff happening back in the 90s, I think, or year 2000. And he couldn't believe what he was seeing. And that's how it is when it first started. If you were aware or conscious at all before it all started, about 98 or so, you saw it. It was night and day. It was like walking a science fiction movie, walking outside, because it didn't happen like that before. It was so sudden. But anyway, he complained, this guy who saw it in BC, and he complained to different agencies out there too, and eventually he got it from some answer from the military out in Canada, in British Columbia, who told him that they were not doing a military exercise. However, he'd been told already from another organization that there was a military exercise. So the Canadian military negated that and says, no, there's no military exercise, at least not in their records. So who was doing it? Someone was doing it, you see. And he goes through the story of this guy, as I say, who checked up and checked to try to find what really was going on. And he was told that this is Terry Astute, the manager of planning and environment at the Victoria International Airport, responded to callers complaining about the strange patterns of circles and grids being woven over the British Columbia capital. Stewart left a message on his answering machine tape, a message that was later heard by more than 15 million radio listeners. And Stewart explained it's a military exercise, you see. He says, and Canadian Air Force exercise is going on. But then he says, they called Comox, which is the Canadian Forces base on Vancouver Island. It says Canada's biggest radar installation. and is easily capable of tracking the U.S. formations coming up from the south. When asked for a response to Stewart's statement, the Basic Information Officer at CFB Comox replied tersely that no military operation is taking place. So, by the summer of 2001, pictures of contrails were being circulated by the Associated Press, and the word chemtrails could be overheard in coffee shop conversations across the continent. And of course then, so the big boys got into action, and U.S. Senator Colonel Walter Washbaugh, chief of the Congressional Inquiry Division for the Secretary of Air Force in Washington, D.C., called chemtrails a hoax. I had to do that initially. They always tell you not to believe what you're saying. And he blamed the increased number of contrails on significant civil aviation growth in the past decade. And the author goes on to say he's right on that score. National Science Foundation found that in certain heavily trafficked corridors, artificial cloud cover has increased by as much as 20%. Well, I wouldn't fall for that so easily. I mean, they're also spraying out of many, many planes. However, it says here that officials' denials reached new altitudes of absurdity when another colonel claimed the U.S. Air Force does not conduct spraying operations over populated areas. But he forgot about all the tankers they sprayed in overpopulated areas in Vietnam when they sprayed Agent Orange over the whole darn place. So meanwhile, the internet was abuzz with chemtrail conspiracy theories, yada, yada, yada. So this goes through the history of chemtrails. And then it goes into the Wellbach patent. Wellsbach it's called. In 1994, the Hughes Aerospace Company was issued a remarkable patent, the Wellsbach patent for reduction of global warming, proposed countering global warming by dispensing microscopic particles of aluminum oxide and other reflective materials into the upper atmosphere. The sky shield would reflect 1 or 2% of incoming sunlight. The patent suggested that tiny metal flakes could be added to the fuel of jet airliners so that particles could be emitted from the jet engine exhausts while the airliner was at cruising altitude. Computer simulations by Ken Caldera at California's Lawrence and Livermore National Laboratory calculated that employing Wellsbach's clinical sunscreen technology could stop global warming over 85% of the planet, despite an anticipated doubling of atmospheric carbon within the next 50 years. It says LLNL estimated the cost of creating this so-called sky shield at $1 billion a year, a cheap fix to avoid threatening the massive profits of the oil industry. Now, by the way, I think University of Alberta put out a study too, I have it here somewhere, where they say it would cost about $5 billion. I guess that's just for Canada. At the 1998 International Seminar on Planetary Emergencies, Edward Teller, the father of the H-bomb, presented his next big idea. Teller called for spreading reflective chemicals over the Earth to act like a mirror shade. If it was impossible to protect the entire planet, these chemical sky shields could at least be extended to cover allies who secretly agreed to allow this unprecedented geoengineering experiment be carried out over their territory. They actually called it the Open Skies Treaty. There's another one just for commercial craft, but there's another one for what they're doing. In the July-August 1998 Science and Technology Review, Teller argued that the sky shield offered a more realistic option for addressing global warming than drastic cutbacks in CO2 emissions. When he was asked if the technology was being pursued, he says, to my knowledge, the answer is negative. In fact, the technology already exists and existed before that. In 1975, the U.S. Navy patented a device for producing a powder contrail having maximum radiation scattering ability. The powder contained a mixture of 0.3 micron size titanium dioxide pigment particles coated with 0.0027 micron hydrophobic colloidal silica. Back with more on this after this break. Very important article. Hi folks, I'm back cutting through the matrix and talking about the chemtrails and basically how you're being managed, your minds are being managed, so you don't really think about them. It can be important after all if the media doesn't mention it, and if famous people don't come out and make a fuss of it, you won't think anything of it. That's what Brzezinski said. He said you'll only be able to talk and think about the things that are on the major media the next day. That's what you do. Most folk do. They talk about the previous day's news. If it's not in the news, it can't be important. Now, as it was on to say, this is in Canada again. In the spring of 1998, rain falling through heavy chemtrails over Espanola, Ontario. And I remember when that happens, because it doesn't say it in here, but I know there was a lot of sickness in the area. They were coming in low and they're coming over the Great Lakes. And there was a deal that Canadian government had made with the US. The US jets were coming up, going low and spraying this stuff. Understand, Canadians really are guinea pigs. We were the first ones to do GM food. We didn't even know we were eating the stuff for 10 years. They kept it secret. That came out in the papers. Government makes a secret deal with Monsanto and kept it from the public for 10 years that we're even eating this stuff. And then they studied our health effects, you see. And they know it worked. It kills us. But anyway, here they were testing on the people on this little town of Espanola. It's not far from me, in Ontario. And it was found to contain concentrations of aluminum particles 7 times higher than permitted by Canadian health safety laws. Provincial health officers ordered tests after residents began complaining about, this is what you get with it. There's more to it than this. Severe headaches, chronic joint pain. It'll give you arthritis, a lot of people. Also gives you cramping in the muscles. Dizziness, sudden extreme fatigue, acute asthma attacks, even if you've never had asthma in your lives, and feverless flu-like symptoms. The results of the tests were not released. Now, however, it was more than that, because there was also a massive increase in stillbirths amongst people and animals. The people going into the forest were noticing the deer were having stillbirths as well. But so were the women living there too. And it says the report of illness all came from residents inside a 50 square mile area who complained they'd been subjected to months of spraying by photo-identified, and it's true, I've seen the photographs, U.S. Air Force tanker planes, refueling planes. The USAF denied the intrusions, and the government in Canada shut up. On November the 18th, 1998, Canadian opposition party defence critic Gordon Earl petitioned Parliament on behalf of the people of Espanola, speaking out on behalf of Canada's new Democratic Party. He says over 500 residents of the Espanola area have signed a petition raising concerns over possible government involvement in what appears to be aircraft emitting visible aerosols. They found high traces of aluminum and quartz in particulate and rainwater samples. Maybe you're breathing all this stuff in and it gets through the lungs into the bloodstream. These concerns, combined with associated respiratory ailments, have led these Canadians to take action and seek clear answers from this government. The petitioners call upon Parliament to repeal any law that would permit the dispersal of military chaff, they call it chaff, or any cloud-seeding substances whatsoever by domestic or foreign military aircraft without the informed consent of the citizens of Canada thus affected. A Harvard School of Public Health team determined that particulates with a diameter less than 10 microns, which is 1/10 the thickness of a human hair, pose a serious threat to public health. Remember the other one was 0.3 microns, the stuff that we're spraying in the States. On April the 2nd, 2001, the New York Times warned these microscopic motes are able to infiltrate the tiniest compartments in the lungs and pass readily into the bloodstream, and have been most strongly tied to illnesses and early death, particularly in people who are already susceptible to respiratory problems. On December the 14th, 2000, the New England Journal of Medicine reported that inhaling particulate matter of a size 10 microns or smaller leads to a 5% increased death rate within 24 hours of the spraying. That's what it means. Taylor's sunscreen calls for spraying 10 million tons of talcum fine reflective particulates of 10 to 100 micron sizes. And then it says the Congress addresses the chemtrails. On October the 2nd, 2001, Representative Dennis Kucinich of Ohio introduced the Space Preservation Act of 2001, which called for the elimination of exotic weaponry from space. Amongst the weapons to be banned were weather modification weapons such as HARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, and chemtrails. Though H.R. 3616 was later amended to remove the section that would have banned chemtrails, the original bill acknowledged the existence of chemtrail technology remains on the pages of the congressional records. With chemtrails now officially admitted by the U.S. government, an even bigger trial was set to begin in the court of public opinion. And then it says chemtrails go global. Sightings of oddly lingering plumes, sometimes resembling rocket trails, are not confined to North America. Well, on leaving Italy in the summer of 1999, the U.S. Navy's Kitty Chastain sat in her hotel balcony and watched aerial grids being laid all day just offshore over the Bay of Naples. It all started at the same time, folks. In Spain, on April 27, 2000, the American tourist John Henricks dashed off a quick email from El Cafe of Internet, where we were surprised to see that the chemtrails are as bad here as they are anywhere, both in Mallorca and Barcelona. Add Sweden to the list. And it says chemtrail activity has been reported released in 14 allied nations, including Australia, Belgium, Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Holland, Ireland, Italy, New Zealand, Scotland, Sweden, and the United States. And then it says another scary scenario. According to the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado, the only way to form artificial clouds in warm, dry air is to introduce enough particulates into the atmosphere to attract and accrete all available moisture into visible vapor. If repeated often enough, the resulting rainlessness haze can lead to drought. Drought, folks. Back with more.
Young people, they look like walking zombies. Everybody's got heart problems, lung problems. You all are sick. How many here have gotten their blood tested? Are you telling me this blood test is a farce from a laboratory and from my doctor? Here's another thing I want to tell you, too. I was told that my doctor was being contacted and he was going to send me to a toxicologist. Well, he doesn't know anything about it. He said he was told that they informed him to send us to the poison control. Well, we've done that back in February. So what's going on here? Please stop that. I'd like to hear some answers to my questions, not just testimony, specific answers. Who wants to drink the water? Anybody want to raise their hands? Excuse me, sir. Well, extend it. You can extend it. Okay, she spoke for 20 minutes with a high school chemistry class. There's a lot more information out there than that. This is terrible, and you are all being affected by this. You better wake up, look up, and realize what's being dumped upon us. Do your research and turn off the TVs, all of you. This is for real. Our own government, the United Nations, is making us sick, and you better wake up. You, sir, doctor, you have a public responsibility to look into this instead of listen to this. This is terrible. I want some answers. Let's hear it. Why? Why won't you respond? This is the Public Health Board. I'm sick. You're supposed to help. Let's hear it. Who wants to drink the water? The DEQ says this is safe to drink. Does anybody want to drink some rainwater? Nobody's raising their hands. My time is up. My time might be up very soon, as well as many other people. You better really start using your noodle, what it was made for. Don't just watch TV and take this kind of propaganda to put down the research of scientists for 15 years. Thanks for the extra time, okay? I want some answers in writing.